10 Plagues Bible Story for Children. The story of the 10 Plagues is one of the most famous stories in the Bible. It is a tale of God's power, Moses' leadership, and the journey of the Israelites to freedom from slavery in Egypt. The plagues were a series of punishments that God sent to Egypt, to convince Pharaoh to let the Israelites go. Each plague was a demonstration of God's control over nature and the world. This version of the story is simplified for children, so they can understand the lessons behind it while engaging with the exciting narrative. Introduction: God's plan for His people. Long ago, the Israelites lived in Egypt. They had been living there for hundreds of years, but over time, the Egyptians made them slaves. They worked very hard, and life was difficult for them. They prayed to God for help, and God listened. He decided to send a man named Moses to lead them out of Egypt and to freedom. But Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, did not want to let the Israelites go. So, God sent 10 plagues to show His power, and to convince Pharaoh to free the Israelites. Let's explore each of the 10 plagues. 1. The first plague: water turns to blood. God told Moses and his brother Aaron to go to Pharaoh, and ask him to let the Israelites go. When Pharaoh refused, God turned the water of the Nile River into blood. What happened? Aaron struck the water of the Nile with his staff. The river, along with every stream, pond, and lake, turned into blood. The fish died, and the water smelled bad. The Egyptians could not drink the water. What it means: God was showing that He could control even the rivers of Egypt. This plague made life very hard for the Egyptians, but Pharaoh still refused to let the Israelites go. 2. The second plague: frogs everywhere. Since Pharaoh wouldn't listen after the first plague, God sent another. This time, He covered Egypt with frogs. What happened? Frogs came up from the rivers and filled every house, bedroom, and kitchen. The Egyptians could not escape the frogs. They were everywhere. What it means: frogs were seen as sacred in Egypt, but this plague showed that too much of something, even something special, can become a curse. Pharaoh begged Moses to stop the frogs, but when they were gone, he still refused to let the Israelites leave. 3. The third plague: gnats or lice. Next, God sent a plague of tiny biting insects, either gnats or lice. These tiny creatures made life miserable for the Egyptians. What happened? Aaron struck the dust of the ground, and the dust turned into swarms of gnats or lice. These insects covered people and animals, making everyone itchy and uncomfortable. What it means: this plague showed that even the small things in life, like dust, are under God's control. Once again, Pharaoh refused to let the Israelites go. 4. The fourth plague: swarms of flies. God sent Moses back to Pharaoh with another warning, but Pharaoh would not listen. So, God sent swarms of flies to cover the land. What happened? Huge swarms of flies filled the air and landed on everything. The flies made it impossible to live comfortably, buzzing around the people and spoiling their food. Interestingly, the land where the Israelites lived, called Goshen, was not affected by the flies. What it means: God was protecting His people while punishing the Egyptians. But still, Pharaoh's heart was hard, and he did not free the Israelites. 5. The fifth plague: death of livestock. The next plague was even worse. God caused all of the Egyptian livestock to die. What happened? The animals that belonged to the Egyptians: horses, donkeys, camels, cows, and sheep died from a terrible disease. None of the Israelites' animals died. What it means: God was showing that He had the power to take away the Egyptians' wealth and livelihood. Pharaoh remained stubborn and would not let the Israelites go. 6. The sixth plague: boils on the skin. Next, God sent a plague that affected the Egyptians personally. Painful sores, called boils, appeared on their skin. What happened? Moses took soot from a furnace and threw it into the air. It caused painful sores, boils, to break out on the skin of the Egyptians. The boils covered everyone from Pharaoh to his servants, causing great pain. What it means: this plague was a direct attack on the health of the Egyptians. Even in their suffering, Pharaoh would not listen to God's message. 7. The seventh plague: hailstorm. God then sent a terrible hailstorm, the likes of which had never been seen in Egypt. What happened? Moses raised his staff, and God sent thunder, lightning, and hail from the sky. The hailstorm destroyed crops, trees, and homes. Anyone or anything left outside was hit by the hail and could be hurt or killed. The land of Goshen, where the Israelites lived, was once again spared. What it means: God demonstrated his control over the weather, and how he could protect his people while punishing the Egyptians, but Pharaoh's heart remained hard. 8. The 8th plague: locusts. After the hail, God sent an army of locusts to destroy whatever was left of Egypt's crops. What happened? A wind blew in swarms of locusts. These insects ate everything green that was left after the hailstorm. The Egyptians' food supply was completely destroyed. What it means: this plague showed the complete devastation that comes when one does not listen to God. Pharaoh again asked Moses to pray for the plague to stop, but when it did, Pharaoh changed his mind and refused to free the Israelites. 9. The 9th plague: darkness. Then God sent a plague of darkness that lasted for 3 days. What happened? Darkness covered all of Egypt. No one could see anything, and the people were terrified. Only the Israelites had light where they lived. What it means: this plague showed that God had control over the sun and light. Yet, even after the darkness, Pharaoh refused to let the Israelites go. 10. The 10th plague: death of the firstborn. The final and most devastating plague was the death of every firstborn in Egypt. What happened? God told Moses to have the Israelites mark their doors with lamb's blood, so that their homes would be passed over. That night, the firstborn child of every Egyptian family, including Pharaoh's son, died, but the Israelites were spared because they obeyed God's instructions. What it means: this plague showed that obedience to God brings life, and disobedience brings death. After this, Pharaoh finally let the Israelites go. Conclusion: the Exodus. After the 10th plague, Pharaoh told Moses to take the Israelites and leave Egypt. They packed their things and left quickly, finally free from slavery. But even after all of this, Pharaoh changed his mind again and chased after them. But God parted the Red Sea for the Israelites, and they escaped once and for all. The story of the 10 plagues is a powerful reminder of God's love for his people, and his desire for them to live in freedom. It also teaches us about the consequences of hardening our hearts, and not listening to God's voice. Through this story, children can learn the importance of obedience, faith, and trust in God's plan.